Greetings in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. I'm Andre, and I'm here today with John Peach, Iver Lofving, and Lilah. John Peach has some updates from the International Energy Association, and we'll be taking questions. And then Lilah will be talking about diversity in our community and how we can improve the appeal. All right. John, do you want to start your presentation?
Sure. So, just a few months ago, BP announced that they were not going to continue publishing their annual statistical review. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to take a look around at some of the other sources of data that I've got and compare and contrast and see where we're going from there. So I'm going to try to share this screen here. Let's see.
It's at the bottom.
Yeah, there it is. Okay. You see this?
Yep.
Okay. So I looked at EIA, IEA, Jody, Our World in Data, Rystad, and Statista. These are sort of the big sources that are around for data. This is production data since 2005, just to kind of get an idea of how they stack up. The top one is EIA. That's matched pretty closely with Statista. And then there's IEA and BP that are very close. Then Our World in Data.
Oh, hold on. Yep. John, are you in a presentation mode right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not showing up on the live stream. Can you just scroll through the window? Because you're sharing just the presentation window right now.
It's the intro.
So we're just seeing the first slide, Energy Outlook.
Oh, so now what?
So just close your presentation, and then now you're in the window. Just scroll down through the slides.
Got
and
it.
Then okay, all right.
And then
So explain what this is. Okay, go and then.
Oh, did you lose it now?
Yes, we can see it now. BEP statistical analysis ending. Okay, so what is this?
Okay, okay. So quick review again. So the top one here, the blue is EIA, and that matched pretty closely with Statista, and then IEA and BP are pretty close, and then you get the rest of them below that. So I decided that the IEA and EIA are government sponsored or government agencies, and they're probably sort of the most independent. They're not financially driven, right? And certainly there are biases in everybody, but I figured these are probably the most open and we get the best data from them. So what I've done in this update is I've used IEA and EIA data from 1971 onwards and just taken the mean of those two. Okay, so this is a slight update on what we're calling the growing gap slide. The blue bars here are discoveries.
You're gonna have to click on the slide in the window.
Actually, John, can I make a suggestion? If you can go to view the slideshow, that way we don't see the rest of the screen, and then you can just hit your arrow to move us forward the slide presentation. Might be a little easier.
So where does he go from the menus? Can you guide him through that?
View.
You can go to slideshow, I believe, or view. Yes.
Yeah, I guess normally slideshow gets started with I use F5, but that's in PowerPoint, and I'm using OpenOffice or LibreOffice. So I probably should have done this some other way.
All right.
Okay, well, it's okay the way it is.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, yeah, so the blue is the discoveries, the red is production, and up until the early 70s, production increased exponentially. And then since then, it's kind of linear, maybe a little bit super linear, but basically, increasing every year up until 2018 or so, when it seemed like production kind of hit a peak. So we'll see whether that still holds, but it may be that we've hit the peak already. So, but discoveries peaked in 1964, other than Gawar, and have generally been declining since. In 2020, they discovered 20 billion barrels, which was quite a lot, but then the next year fell back down to, I think, about 4 or something. So discoveries there are generally trending downwards.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, Hubbard linearization is trying to figure out what ultimately recoverable reserves will be. And the way it does it is it takes production data and plots production divided by cumulative production on the y-axis and cumulative production on the x-axis. And it gives you sort of a straight line. And if you extend the straight line out, it'll hit 0, and that's presumably the URR. When Hubbard did this, it was a very clever way to get the URR, that is total amount that we can expect to recover. It was good for the time, but it depended on using production data rather than actual discovery data, because in the 1950s, when he was doing this, we were nowhere near even the peak. It was 10 years in the future, and so trying to fit discovery data was kind of pointless at that time. But now that we're 70 years ahead, we can get a fit. And so what I've done is I've fit cumulative discoveries, and I split it up into 2 different eras, what I'm calling conventional era and fracking era. They seem to fit pretty well, and it seemed to kind of fit what's going on. And so I'm fitting to what's called a logistic function. And the nice thing about the logistic function is that one of the parameters that it returns to the fit is what the maximum is going to be. And so for conventional, it came out to 1990 gigabarrels, and for the fracking year, it came out to 250. Gives us a total of maybe 2,300 gigabarrels total, or 2,240. But it's going to be. I mean, this is just what the fit will say. It doesn't say for sure that we'll wind up at 2,240, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what's out there. So the advantage of this is that it fits to the discovery data rather than production. And so it's really kind of looking at the source a little bit better than production data. And it's a more mathematically robust way of doing the fit than Hubbard linearization. So with that, and using the IEA and EIA data, plotted the cumulative discoveries and production so far, and we're now at 2,200 gigabarrels of discovery. And remember that according to these fits, we got 2,240 total. So we're kind of reaching the end of discoveries. And so far, production is 1,640. So just a quick analysis of what's going on here. Production reached the midpoint of discovery so far in 2006. And if the peak happened in 2018, then at that point, cumulative production was 1,500 gigabarrels, and we had 740 left. So what this means is that at the peak, we were 2/3 of the way through our total production, right? And so a lot of people have been saying, well, the bell curve that Hubbard predicted would say that at the peak you'd be halfway through, and I think that's a kind of a dangerous assumption. And that if we really are 2/3 of the way through, then the backside is going to be a much steeper descent than the front side. So,
and I apologize, John, I was following you, but can you explain a little bit, if there's a total of 3,400,
2240 if this fit is correct.
If the fit's correct, and we have 740 left. I mean, I still don't understand why it's not halfway. You're saying is it because they're the last bits we can't get out? Or
no, the assumption that's wrong is that it's not a bell curve. It's not going to be symmetric. The production coming up will be much longer than the production on the backside. It's gonna fall off very sharply.
What do you think? Because I've been listening to some interesting talks lately with Nate Hagens and Daniel Schmuckberger, and they're talking about the impacts of AI. And one thing that I think our community hasn't talked much about is how AI could potentially, at least temporarily, get at places that were not economically feasible. I think the way they discussed it is that it will allow efficiency of resource extraction where places that were not factored in now will be productive based on AI's capabilities.
So sure, there could be some production changes, technology changes, and so I'm not predicting really anything here. I'm just saying that if we continue the way we are, this is what it seems like it's going to be a sort of a Seneca cliff. But right, there could be technological changes that make this different. On the other hand, in the past, technology has not really kept up with geology. That the geological forces were very much overwhelmed any technical updates. So I would say we have to kind of hold the AI idea back and see how it plays out. The other thing is that half of all oil that's ever been consumed has been consumed in the last 26 years. So you can see that the production is just kind of zooming up, right? Oh, and the other thing is that I've excluded Canadian and Venezuelan tar sands from all of this. And the reason is that the EROI of tar sands is probably around 4 or so. And so I don't think that once conventional oil is gone, that they will be economical anymore. So, I think the estimated total oil in Canada and Venezuela in the tar sands is, something about equal to what conventional oil is. So, 2,000 gigabarrels. But they're producing 1.8 and 0.25 gigabarrels a year in Canada and Venezuela. So about 2 gigabarrels per year. And so, if conventional oil continues for 20 years and then kind of falls off, and we can't afford to do it, then we'll have extracted 40 gigabarrels, right? And we're using about 37 a year. So this adds 1 year. And the remaining amount might as well be on the dark side of the moon. It's just going to be left there.
So that's another question I have, because when we talk about uneconomical, we're talking about our current economic system. But what happens when we go to, let's say, command economy, where, we're going to do whatever we can to at least maintain certain structures that, even if it's uneconomical during our, with current financial our financial situation and debt system, if that gets blown away and we have suddenly a situation where governments control the energy system, and we're extracting, but we have a simpler. We still are probably going to be extracting, but that oil is going to be used differently. And even though there's a low EROI, they're probably still going to do it.
Yeah, there probably will be some of that going on, but there are definitely some lower limits on how far it will go, right? That if it gets down to 1, even governments won't keep it going.
Oh, hey. Well, we just have Simon here for a few minutes. I was just wondering if we, if we wanted to, how much longer do you think for the presentation? Do you think
I just have one more slide.
Okay, so maybe we could briefly, just finish the presentation, and then, but then we'll have more discussion period after, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the only I haven't even updated this one. This is just the EROI loss plot, and it shows. I guess the thing to take away here is the green is what's going into EROI, right? And so our total production is the red curve here, and the net is blue, and they're separating away, fairly rapidly towards the end here, meaning that we're going over that net energy cliff. So that's it. That was my update, and we can.
Cool. So it was saying we have 563 barrels left, billion barrels. So that would be enough roughly for how many years?
So we're doing about 37. So it'd be 15, maybe 20 years.
15, 20 years. Okay, cool. All right. So does anyone have any questions regards the presentation?
I just want to say terrifying as usual. Thank you, John.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. All right. So since we have Simon here and he only for a few minutes, I was just wondering if you guys had any. I did have a few questions for Simon from other people. Iver was asking about the OPEC cuts. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that. Iver?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know OPEC has announced that they're going to cut 1 million. And what do you call it? I also heard that, what was it? Russia was going to cut 1 million, and also Saudi Arabia is going to cut 1 million. I'm not sure if they're immediate, but they're kind of soon. And I was wondering if that's just covering for what they're going to drop anyway, or is it like reality?
Simon?
Oh, sorry, I'm actually wedged between meetings here. Sorry for interrupting, and sorry for disrupting your nice schedule. Lilah, nice to meet you. Yes, okay. So what I would say there is, I believe we are seeing a wider picture, right? Where the BRICS economies have come together and they've put a strategy on the ground that's been quite a few years in the making, and they're in the process of creating a new currency that is commodity-backed and an economic system that's resource-based. And I think we're approaching a point where everything east will divorce itself from everything west. And so it doesn't surprise me at all at this stage of the game, when everything else has been drained, we're now seeing a coordinated action from multiple countries at once, which is going to put a lot of stress and strain on the existing system. I don't think it's an accident. I see, and what to take from that is there is a wider plan afoot, and if that is the case, what else must we be about to see? This is not an isolated incident. So if peak oil really was in 2018, and I personally think it's now looking like that to be the case, then the post-peak oil geopolitical maneuvering is going to be seen now, in the 5 or 6 years after that date. And so what we're seeing is entirely appropriate. Look, I just came out of a meeting with someone who is come from Germany, and they were saying that a lot of industry is leaving Germany and going to the United States, and some is going to China. But that's all the big stuff. All the middle stuff and the SMEs, the Chinese money is coming in and they're cleaning them up. The German infrastructure is being brought up at the small business and the medium business level by Chinese corporate investment. So I also think this is actually part of a larger plan, which about strategy, which I'm sort of seeing, where corporate control and actual control of industrial assets all over the planet is being secured by. It's almost like an unconventional war that has not been declared. That's what I would say. Yeah.
All right. And so I have a question from a YouTube listener. They're asking if it's 15, 22 years to the end of oil and it takes 10 to 15 years to start an ore mine, what reason would the oligarchy have to exert any change? Wouldn't they just hole up or something like that?
I think the people involved in this think in really long term, right? And the idea of peak oil, that's been discussed for a long time. We're not the only people who have put this together, right? In geopolitical actions across the last 30, 40 years show that to be so. The idea of an economic crash is also not a new thing, and it's been known for a long time. I believe that situations have been organized where approaching the crash, we'll see one set of behaviors. During the crash, we'll see another set of behaviors, all to the end of, on the other side of the crash, every country is jockeying for its relative position. And we're all doing that. I'm doing that. Anyone who's part of the prepper community is actually doing that. So, and so I guess what I would say to that is we're seeing a strategy we don't understand yet. And it doesn't have anything to do with nations. It's beyond borders. It seems to be associated with money interests.
Mm. And I have a question from David Casey, Peak Oil moderator, and he was wondering if you think the elites will orchestrate a crash so they'd be in control of it, or
the simple answer to that, like I tend to hold a few crazy ideas, and it's quite okay for everyone to disagree with me. That's fine. But I personally think that these people organize wars to make money, right? They have absolutely no qualms at all about initiating a massive economic crash for self-benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's seen as a tool to reorder the world in the way that they want, on their terms.
Okay, and we have another YouTube listener who's asking if we've reached the energy cliff, or is that in the future?
That's a damn good question. According to conventional thinking, I do believe we've reached the energy cliff. But if someone's going to pull a rabbit out of the hat that changes things, who knows? But according to conventional thinking, yes, the energy cliff is here.
Before you got on, I was asking about how AI might change the energy cliff. I've been reading a lot and listening to podcasts on how AI could accelerate extraction in places that maybe were unprofitable or difficult to reach, and its ability could at least kick the can, and unfortunately make the slope even sharper on the once we really hit the cliff, but it might be able to kick the can further for a bit.
Yeah, well, there's actually a few technologies that might change things, right? So on the energy side, we've got things like geothermal deep drilling. I've actually seen one of those drills they're talking about, and I think it will work. Right, but there are other problems to solve there. The other one is liquid thorium, liquid fuel fission using thorium, thorium molten salt. That's the Chinese have actually done it. I've actually got a photograph of the unit they've got. Right, that could change things. Yeah, and so then you've got technologies like AI and nanotech that we have no clue what's going to do to us. What I do see, though, is there's a change in mood in how our leaders are talking to their people compared to, say, 50 years ago. So if you go back 50 years and you look at how our leadership were talking to us then compared to now, it's not nice. They're not behaving like they've got our best interests at heart. The way they talk to us is different. So to me, there is a plan at foot, and we're being softened up. And so things like AI probably will change things, and robotics. But who will they change things for, and on behalf of whom? Like, it won't be a society homogeneously as it is now. I think we're going to be carved up into subgroups. And this group will do fine, but everyone else will do poorly. I don't know.
I have another YouTube question about space-based solar. And do you have any comment on that?
Question. Once you've actually got the energy up in orbit, how do you get it down to Earth? Asking for a friend.
Well, what I was reading, they were planning on doing microwave lasers onto ground stations.
So when I sort of looked at that very briefly, I didn't understand the technology, how they were going to do that without terrible losses, or a lot more losses than is going to be sensible. I am prepared to be convinced that it will work, but I need to see more to be shown it will work. I can also see it going horribly wrong when someone presses the wrong button and the microwave moves 2 or 3 degrees to the left. And yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was thinking also, like, wouldn't it require a huge amount of energy in order to get those things, and then we don't have that much energy left, so
So getting stuff up into orbit is one challenge. Getting a system that could actually collect enough solar power to make this worthwhile, okay, that's another engineering challenge. Then getting the energy from up there down to here. If we're having health problems with electronic smog, imagine a super beam of microwaves, if you will. So, and that once we've got the energy down on the ground, how much of it's left to be useful to disperse off to everywhere else? Once the system is established, what energy will it produce in an energy return or an energy invested kind of way, like in an operating context? We need innovative thinking. That is clear. I have yet to be convinced that is viable.
Well, and also
I would throw out 2 other constraints. One of those being we're having increasing amount of space junk. And I forgot the name of it. There's some theory that at some point it hits a threshold where the debris make it almost impossible to keep things up in space. And then the other interesting thing is climate change. The upper atmosphere is getting cooler, and it's changing our ability to keep also our satellites and objects up in space. We've got some other constraints potentially.
Wow. We've got to clean up our trash.
We got to clean up our trash. Yeah.
Well, also the atmosphere absorbs about 30% of the incoming light. So putting a solar array above the atmosphere is only going to save you that 30%, right? So you have to have, that the ROI there isn't that great to make it really viable. I don't see at this point.
Yeah. We need innovative thinking. So, okay, and so we need to consider the unusual and unorthodox. What we need is a feasibility study with all the numbers.
And I have a question also again from David Casey, and why haven't the elites gone clean on the alien thing? And I guess to relate it to this, if we went clean on that extraterrestrials are there and can help us, then they could help with the energy issues. But I don't know if you have any comment on that.
So there's two schools of thought here. One, that there is indeed an alien presence, and they're using that, releasing it now as a distraction. Look at that. Don't look at what we've done. The second thing is our military have actually had this technology for a long time, but they've actually sort of kept quiet about it, and they need a way of releasing it to the civilian population in a way that it can explain their behavior. So this is actually human tech that's been rolled out to us. Either way, I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing this sort of stuff now at a time when we may have had peak oil a couple of years in the past. We've got a major military conflict on the cards if we don't sort ourselves out quickly, and we've got an economic discontinuity coming of epic proportions. And so while all that's happening, suddenly aliens?
Yeah. And okay. And then there's also, I got a question from YouTube. They said they found some research on a nanotech efficient way for water splitting, producing hydrogen. And could that make hydrogen a possible energy alternative?
Don't know. It depends how efficient it is. Now we're back to can we actually store hydrogen? Can we transport it? We've got the problems with the brittleness of hydrogen and its explosive nature. The current way of producing hydrogen at the moment is only 28% efficient, and that's what shoots it down. With every new technology, there will be some good stuff, but there'll be some repercussions as well. What are those repercussions? I don't know. Let's see the numbers, and let's see a feasibility study.
Mm-hmm. And the last question I have here is from David Casey as well. And what percentage of people will lose their minds?
I don't see. That's an interesting question. I think there's like a rising tide in human consciousness that actually understands that something is wrong. They can smell it. They can taste it. Yeah. Will it be a surprise, or when something breaks, you go, yeah, we knew that would happen. And people who would claim not to take part in such conversations suddenly know a lot about it. We're like a big school of fish that's about to change direction. Yeah.
All right. Iver, John, or Lilah, did you have another question for Simon? Iver?
Well, I have absolutely no opinion whatsoever on the aliens, but I kind of don't know what that is. But anyway,
I'm an alien.
I do have an opinion on Sasquatch. But anyway,
me too.
I was wondering, like my original question, which is about the million barrel cut from each. I think it was two OPEC groups. Is that just to cover up the fact that they don't really have another million barrels, or do you think it's because they kind of are holding it for later?
I don't know.
Could be both.
The Hall of Mirrors. Yes, it could be both.
Yeah. All right. Oh, well.
Then Lilah?
Yeah, so I think we could also throw out there that the anticipated economic downturn could also be affecting decisions. You know, they're really affected by lower cost oil. So, you know, I don't know. It's hard to tell in my mind, you know, whether we're at peak or not at peak, and whether the game is hoarding or, you know, price manipulation or a combination thereof. But I did want to throw out one other article I was reading this morning, which is China's been on a gold buying spree. It's the 7th straight month. This just came out on Business Insider today. And it's fascinating. Their foreign currency holdings fell $13.18 trillion. You know, to me, it seems like they are planning for a change in the economic system. If you can see their behaviors right now, at least financially.
Yeah, it is the implications of peak oil is everything has to change, right? The change is not necessarily positive, right? It can be rough and it can be exploitive. I think all the countries around us are actually jockeying to change everything. And yes, their focus is economic.
Oh, and I had a question on if you saw my recent distributist kind of proposal for basically if people have surplus land, then it could be redistributed to people that don't have land, and as a possible way of transitioning when we're in a low energy future. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
So I guess the biggest problem there is most people wouldn't know what to do. Like if you took most people and you dropped them on a bit of arable land, what do? So there's that side of things. Then there's also, once they're there and they know how to actually feed themselves, all the other aspects of human society, how do we deal with that? So there's a few moving parts there that need to be nailed down. Then there's the question of, well, if we did redistribute 8 billion people, what does that actually look like? Where do people actually sort of move to? And what's that going to do to natural biosystems that we actually need to keep going and get to sort of come back and recover? Or are humans going to do their thing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, back in the day when they gave out land out west, a lot of people would get their 240 acres and they'd do as much improvement as they could, you know, to keep the land. And then most of them moved to the towns that were nearby. They were, you know, and then it turned into the Dust Bowl. Some of them did some farming and it turned into the Dust Bowl. And of course, they ended up abandoning their deeds.
Yeah. All right, guys, I've got to go to my next meeting. So I've got to go.
All right.
Lovely to see you. And
okay.
Lilah, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Can I say something about Lilah's, what she was talking about?
Okay.
You were talking about how China is kind of converting into gold and dropping out of foreign currencies. That kind of makes sense. I think all the, you know, we call gold the barbarous metal, etc. But I think a lot of places, a lot of the power in the world is controlled by, I mean, it's sort of the ultimate economic tool. And I think, you know, if you can get as much of that as you can, it can be converted into any other thing, or it could be the basis for a new, you know, reserve currency. And so I think, you know, you can almost see where the gold flowed from one empire to the next as, you know, throughout history. And, you know, it was kind of like, you know, the golden rule. Who has the gold makes the rules. And, you know, the Spanish had a lot of it and the English had some. And then it sort of flowed, you know, it flows to different places. But I think it is a big part of economic power still.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's fair enough. Anyway, I really got to go. So see you. Right. See you guys.
Great talking to you.
Bye.
Ivor, I had a thought about that because, gold made sense in growing empires and expanding territories, and, you can exploit resources. What happens when, our energy resources are on the decline, our, food, material resources are on decline, and you throw climate change into the mix? China right now is having, I think this is the worst heat wave they've ever had. And it's like last year was the worst heat wave. They've got rivers drying up. They've got problems. Gold, while at least right now, maybe in the next decade, can secure them resources from larger parts of the empire, as the energy access shrinks, no amount of gold is going to help them if they can't get to where they need to extract those resources. And especially good parts of China are not farmable. They've got some real problems when I think of like available resources for their empire.
No, I agree. I'm just saying that every empire tries to do that. I mean, look, the Spanish tried to control gold for quite a while. They had all the gold from the Americas, and they ended up trading it into Germany and the rest of Europe, and they ended up being the poorest nation, one of the poorer nations in Europe. So it's a strategy. Everybody tries to play this game, but it's mostly governments that play the gold game. Gold is during the Roman Empire, there was the most of the silver coinage was debased more and more and more and more until finally it was pretty much useless. But the rich people kind of held their money in solidus or gold, and they tried to hang on to what they have. So I'm just saying it's just since the Roman Empire, it's been the game that we've all been playing is not us, but really the empires and the big people that are trying to build it are trying to hang on to power by getting the gold. The old saying is all wars are for God, gold, oil, or drugs.
That's great.
I think it's part of their game. That's the game, try to control the gold supply, and then they're going to try to kick off a new currency, and it might or might not become the world's reserve currency or the one that everybody wants to have. It also goes along with having a lot of naval power. If you have naval power, you can enforce, trade, etc. So it's the same game they've been playing. I mean, it was Portugal, Spain, the Dutch, the English, us, and now
China.
Well, the BRICS. We don't call it the BRICS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Lilah, I was wondering if you wanted to do your segment now.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm happy to dive further where we're at. Sure. So I guess during the last discussion, the question came up, where are the women? And I would broaden that to, a more diverse group of folks showing up. One of the things that I wanted to remark on is that, actually in my current town, and we're moving soon to an intentional community, but in our current town, I started a resilience course, and actually more women than men showed up. And it was interesting to hear the breakout. I found men tended to be the techno-optimists. And again, these are generalities, and, I probably don't fit the general norm anyway, but, and the women tended to be more of like social or educational optimists, right policy, right education, and men was more along, we just need the right technology or breakthroughs. So I think, there are definitely different roadblocks, but I don't think there is an issue of women or men having a proclivity to being able to think about and have interest in this topic. I talk to a lot of people, and actually I find a lot of times women are a little bit more open to this. I find a lot of men push back on technology and economics will solve it. But I do think we're not seeing folks in the peak oil community for a couple of reasons, in my opinion. One, I've been on for 14 or 15 years. I've had multiple times where, and again, this is, I'm tough, I can handle things, but I've had to block multiple men. I've had to go to administrators because I've had sexual and aggressive comments thrown at me offline, and some really derogatory comments, when I share opinions, which is fine. I like the diversity of opinions, but, when your gender is used as kind of like a, war tool verbally, it's unpleasant. So I think it could be a tough community to be a part of. And then the other piece is, I think, just like having time available for this. I think, there was multiple studies that came out on New York Times and CNN that men on average have about 8 hours of free time per week compared to women. So most of my friends women who I know who understand these topics and we have deep conversations, they don't have disposable time to get involved. So, I just want to like think about, there might be things that might not, be apparent. And then I think for lower income houses and also, or lower income households, people of color who are struggling, a lot of folks have to run 2+ jobs just to make it. They don't have time available to even think about these issues. They're just struggling, on, trying to pay the bills. Was it like over 50% of Americans can't even afford one medical bill over $300? So, when I think about this community, I don't think it's a lack of interest or, intellectual capacity or biological thinking. I think there are some real roadblocks for personal involvement.
Yeah, I think the financial issue is a really big one, that if you are struggling to get by every day, you're not going to waste time thinking about, are we going to run out of oil soon? Right? That's just not on the radar at all. The other thing was, I was thinking about this, Tom Murphy at UCSD, he's a physicist, may have seen he's got a blog called Do the Math. And a few years ago, he ran a poll asking, he was kind of interested in what sort of people it is that are interested in it. And it turned out to be, the sort of technical introvert, and it was a very small segment of the general population. And I was thinking more about this, that I think most people view the problem as a social problem, right? That if we can get everybody to agree to do whatever they think is the right idea, then we get everybody going along and we can solve this problem. Whereas those of us who are, I guess, more of the technical end, and they're definitely the techno optimists, but then there are quite a few of us who are looking at this saying, it doesn't matter how much social pressure we have, physics is going to take over and drive this thing. It's not going to be, you can't solve a social issue if the geophysics don't work.
Yeah,
I definitely tested right in there. I'm not the introvert, but I'm the extrovert of the technicals. Yeah, it's interesting how even my friends who are technical, if they're the technicals optimists, they don't want to think about this too much because they like technology and they want to continue with that regardless of putting in perspective, is it possible, and that's, or a good idea to do. Yeah. And I always wonder why AI is one of those topics that I'm spending time on now because I don't really fully understand it well. But when I look at the risks, I'm like, why isn't there questions of not like looking at the risk breakout? Should we even be doing this? That's not even a question on the table. It's a question of, should we take a break? What are the guardrails that we put on it? There's not even a willingness to explore what are the real risks. And, should we not do this or only do this in a very limited fashion? That can't even be part of the discussion.
Yeah. Of course, I worked at a place where technology was our last name. And everybody was, or pretty much everybody was a techno optimist, right? That we could solve everything with technology, and um, I came to see that they were all extremely clever, but they didn't have the wisdom to see very far in the future. But they could solve every technical problem imaginable.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to comment about the AI bit because I specialize in AI. And so, based on my analysis, we don't really have to worry about AI simply because the amount of energy that is required is enormous. Like GPT-4 uses like as much as a small city. We don't have to be like, and we're running out of energy. So really, in terms of AI or technology, what we should really be focused on is figuring out how to do it in the future. Like, how do we do it with low energy? How can we have at least some electronics, at least communication technology, at least maybe some printers and some scanners so we could photocopy books? Like that, those are the technologies we should be focused on. And based on my research, we should, instead of making silicon chips, we've got to learn how to figure out how to make silicon carbide chips, which have a much longer shelf life and life expectancy and ability to work. And then, like, using renewables, like hydroelectric in the mountains where there's lots of hydroelectric, or concentrated solar powers in desert or something like that.
That reminds me, Iver, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
The other day you said that you had done recycling of solar panels.
Oh, yeah. This guy named Richard Comp came and visited us, and he had a whole bunch of old polysilicon chips that were actually from, industry. And so we actually sort of soldered them together with, silver solder and stuff and made little solar panels. So I thought that was interesting, like it's possible to do that, I mean, it was just very small scale, but I mean, a little one,
Yeah. So I was wondering, so you're recycling the cells intact, right?
Yeah. They were, polysilicon. They were used for, I'm not sure, semiconductor type things. Anyway, they were like little chips, and then he would, you'd break them up into little squares, and then of course, the way solar works is, the photons come down and knock the electrons onto those lines. That's why you have all those lines on the solar panel. And so we'd make the lines out of like silver solder, and then they would go down to there and then turn into electrons and get usable. But I mean, I don't know if that's, I think you could probably do it, because what's gonna like break on a solar panel that would require kind of like recycling? I mean, the what do you call it? The polysilicon is still going to sit there and pull in photons that could, knock them down to those lines that go down to the, it just doesn't seem to me like there's that much in there that's all that, not that hazardous, not very, it's just stuff.
So there's been a lot of talk about how we're going to wind up filling the landfills with solar panels here in a few years. And I don't know what the failure mode is or modes are of solar panels. Although one place I read was that, well, they are becoming more efficient over time, and so it becomes cost effective to throw them away and get new ones.
That's probably it. Because I've seen them working since the 1970s, polysilicon panels. We used to go on these solar tours, and there were people who got them in the 70s. They're still working. They knock down a little bit in efficiency? I mean, that could be also the kind of the lines in there that are messing up.
Well, I think we'll do some research and maybe revisit the solar topic for next time. We just have a few minutes, and some of the YouTube people are wondering about why the media is ignoring the energy topic and the politicians are ignoring the energy topic.
Good question. I think it's too. I've been trying to like convince people lately of the reality of sea level rise. I'm on an island, and it's extremely obvious, right? And here's a little quote from Richard Feynman. Reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. I mean, the thing about it is, if you just, and I've realized, even if you point out to people, here is the problem, you could see it with your eyes. I think it's, we don't live in a reality. We live in another thing. And I think the one of the big aims is to keep people from looking at, don't look up, don't look down, don't look at reality, because it's kind of scary. It's my opinion.
Yeah, John, did you have any opinion on it, or do you know?
Yeah, I don't know. The amount of energy in fossil fuels is so huge that if people realize that we were going to be constricted here, significantly and very quickly, I think it'd be very scary. I think it is a don't look up kind of moment.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, closing thoughts, anyone? You guys wanted to mention before the end of this show?
I was just thinking about scenarios, because I like to play with scenarios in my head. And one of the scenarios, I think we're talking about, society crashing as a monolith, as we go over the peak. But I don't know if it's going to exactly look like that, because I could definitely imagine where, I think Simon talked about the idea of segments of the society dropping out. And this is where I think, kind of, Andre, back to your idea of like AI. AI might do well if, we still have an energy hungry segment of society that, kind of like Hunger Games, lives very well, more high tech, and the outer periphery starts dropping out. So I don't know how this is going to play out. But, it just reminds me, in 2002, when I was really diving into peak oil and getting really worried, I'm like, oh shit, everything's going to crash. And it didn't. And it didn't happen partly from fracking and a number of other factors. But I think we might be at this another place where the peak oil community is prepping in their minds for a certain scenario. But there might be other alternatives that, unfortunately, might drive us deeper down this hole. And I don't know. I'm not saying what's going to happen. I just think we should be open to multiple scenario paths that, might not initially seem like an option, but might happen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I just wanted to clarify some points regarding to what I was saying about the land distribution. And the idea there was simply to make land accessible to purchase for those people who do want to buy it, because then we could increase the number of people who survive, because we have lots of people who are simply too poor to buy land, especially in Canada. I know in America land is much cheaper, but in Canada it's very, very expensive, and most people can't afford land. And so if it was actually like accessible in the price range where people could buy it, then some people could survive on the land. And in terms of what you were saying about the high tech, they did have, like, the mass dreams of the future. They had the deep underground military bases, and they still have the high tech stuff from us, from our civilization. But all the other timelines was different kinds of there was the rustic agricultural communities like the Mennonites and the Amish, and there was the indigenous people living, hunter gatherer style, and then there was the New Age Sylvan that was kind of like the Amish but with trees and robes and food forests. And
that's the direction I'm hoping to go in.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm hoping for too. and they did have technology, and they had extraterrestrials as well. So it is what it is. Yep. Okay, so I think without further ado, we'll close this up.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's really interesting talking to you guys. It's like awesome to talk to people that I don't have to convince of like sea level rise or something ridiculous.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. So we leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite creator.
Thank you.
All right.